Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is yet another wrap up, and this is books 21 through 25 that I read in September and the first 5 books that I read in October. So we will go ahead and get started, and like always we'll work our way up from the lowest rated to the highest rated. So the first book I'll talk about here is a 2.5 star rating, and that's When the Sky Goes Dark by Oliver C. Seneca. So the author did send me this for review, and I do feel bad. Like I didn't like it as much as I hoped I would. So this is essentially a horror novel where we have this plague of violence sweeping across the country. We follow John, who is this college student, and he is essentially going from his college back home to try to find his parents and, make sure everybody's safe during this epidemic of violence. So I will say it is pretty quick to read and it was decently paced, and I really liked this general premise. I do enjoy reading books about sort of infectious diseases and things like that. I think the writing was pretty good overall. It was a little bit slow to start, but kind of once it picks up, it really continues to be fairly fast paced throughout the rest of the book. I could have used a little bit more suspense throughout the book consistently. For instance, there's some cases of what I thought was kind of unnecessary foreshadowing, saying things like, little did he know that this was going to happen. And it's I guessed that was going to be the case, but saying it before it actually happens kind of decreases the suspense. So I think, just omitting that and just saying whatever it was as the story progressed would have been a little bit stronger for me. There were some flashbacks that happened that kind of build on John's life, but to me this kind of detracted from the main story, and I didn't really necessarily want these. But I think a lot of this just is due to the fact that I really didn't like the main character. To me, he read as being very sheltered and judgmental. For instance, there's a scene when people are fighting and he immediately jumps to thinking oh, these people should be shot because they're fighting. And then there's really superficial language when describing people, only one characteristic, the black man, the Indian man, the fat girl. So I didn't love that because I feel there's more to people than just one overall characteristic. Another thing, I really didn't like how he judges women. For instance, there's this one female character, Kat, and he's oh, I don't like her because her name is Kat and I don't like cats. And also she's not as pretty as the other girls in this photo. And that just really rubbed me the wrong way. And there were some quotes about girls become friendlier after drinks, and girls aren't that much different from one another. I really just hated the main character so much. So that's really where this rating kind of comes in for me. I will say, if the author's intention was to make me realize, how this character is a jerk and everything, he was definitely successful at that. I just could not get past my hatred of the main character, unfortunately. I realize I've said a lot of kind of negative things, mostly about this main character, John, but I don't want this to be discouraging, and I know just looking through Goodreads ratings, it does seem like some other people did enjoy this and weren't as bothered by the main character as I was. So I think, if you're not bothered by these things that I mentioned, then this is definitely worth checking out, I think, if you're in the mood for, this sort of apocalypse type story. Now we get into a lot of these 3 stars. And the first book I will talk about here is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. So I'm so sad that I didn't love this more. I know so many people that I follow on BookTube and that I'm friends with really loved this book, but I just struggled with it so much. So this is an adult fantasy, and this is African inspired, and basically we have this society that's built around war. These women have the powers to call dragons, and men can essentially become killing machines. Everybody else, however, who doesn't have these powers are kind of just grunts and fodder for the war. So our main character, Tao, wants to escape this kind of society and have his own life, but people he knows are murdered and he wants revenge. So, like I said, this is just not as good for me as I was hoping. I really actually struggled with the prologue right off the bat. There's a whole bunch of stuff thrown at you, and again, I'm not a stranger to in-depth fantasy, but for some reason, it was just really overwhelming, and I was I don't have any idea what's going on, and it just kind of, I don't know, just rubbed me the wrong way, I guess. So I was already struggling with this. Throughout the book, there's a lot of training and fighting, and I will say, like, military training and just, like, generally school-type settings or military settings, military schools, those tend to work well for me in the books. And so I will say, like, it did pick up a bit for me once we, like, started getting those aspects thrown in here. But in general, I just had a really hard time being invested in this story. There are shorter chapters, so it's really easy to keep going, and, you know, there's a lot of action going on. It's a generally interesting world, but to me, the magic system was really confusing and didn't really make sense, especially with some of the things that happened with Tao. Like, it made no sense at all to me. There's not a whole lot of female characters, and, you know, like, in the prologue, we get this really awesome queen, and then just, like, nothing happens there. So, you know, that was a little bit of a bummer to me. I could have followed her a bit more. I think that would have been interesting. I think, again, you know, my main gripe here, I think, is that I just really disliked Tao. I guess this is going to be a back-to-back reviews of not liking the main characters, but, you know, everything that happens here is because of his own actions, you know, not being thought out or whatever. He's kind of impulsive and just, like, doesn't think about things. What really bothers me is that he just never really thinks that he's the one at fault. This revenge quest that he's on just really didn't land for me, because I'm like, literally all of this could have been avoided, but you just made some, like, really stupid actions, and that's caused, like, all of this mess. There were some really interesting side characters, but, you know, it's very much focused on Tao's story. So, you know, unfortunately for me, I'm not really interested in continuing this story, but, like, if this general premise sounds interesting to you, I would still encourage you to check it out, because I do know so many people who loved it. And I wish I had been one of them. Like, I can't tell you how disappointed I am that I didn't love this more. But, you know, such is life, it happens. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnston. So this is a YA contemporary, and we follow Liz, who has been trying to get financial aid to her dream college, but this falls through. So she essentially enters a competition at her school for, you know, this prom king and queen to get scholarship money. She really doesn't love being in the spotlight, but, you know, she does what she has to in order to get the scholarship money. We have a new girl also in the running to be prom queen. Obviously, she's the competition, but she makes this running, I guess, for prom queen much more bearable for Liz. So I think this was really cute, but it's not something I would reread. When it came out, I put it on hold at the library, and it finally came through, so, you know, I just now read it. But, yeah, I'm glad that I borrowed it from the library, we'll just say that. Like, it's not something I would buy or reread, like I said. I thought this was decently paced overall. I liked seeing Liz gain confidence throughout the book. This prom is not at all like the prom that I had at my school. But it was, I guess, kind of fun to see this setting and, you know, like how some schools take it really seriously. This does deal with heavier topics like racism and homophobia. It's in this, like, really conservative town. We do have really great representation here. Like, we have a black main character. Some of her family members have sickle cell anemia. Liz has anxiety and hates being the focus of everybody, which I found really relatable. The romance here was really great. I definitely rooted for them, so that was wonderful. I did find one friendship in particular to be a little bit problematic. I just thought, like, some characters were a little too quick to forgive others, but, you know, like, ultimately that's forgiveness is a good aspect, but it just happened a little bit too quick for me. In general, I love seeing how supportive people were of her, and yeah, if you're looking for a cute YA contemporary, this is probably worth checking out. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is Ruined by Kendall Gray. So I got this as a review copy from NetGalley. So after Ragnarok, Loki wakes up in a woman's body. Odin has stolen Loki's runes for immortality and other powers, so Loki goes on a quest to retrieve these. So I thought this was pretty decent. This has been on my, like, want-to-read list for several years now, and I saw it on NetGalley as, like, a read-now thing. I was like, oh, okay, perfect. This starts off, like, pretty entertaining, but I will say I did kind of struggle to get through this at times. I really liked this general premise and the Norse mythology that we have here. Like, anything that has to do with any sort of mythology, I really love. I thought there were some really funny moments here, but there were some others I think that just didn't quite land for me, where I felt like it was just trying too hard to be funny, but, you know, humor is subjective, so this could just be a me thing, and, you know, other people may find these scenarios more entertaining than I did. So we have, you know, Odin's ravens, in particular Hugin, I think, is more prevalent here, and Hugin is reborn as a chicken instead of, you know, a raven. The relationship between Loki and Hugin was, like, by far the best part of this book, and I think you can, like, really see how Loki evolves as a person in terms of, like, how this relationship changes over the book. there's like this convention for a TV show that's based on Norse mythology, and I thought this was like generally entertaining. And you know, we only get a little bit of the convention at the very end, but it was pretty enjoyable. It's kind of like a Game of Thrones type feel, I guess. In terms of the romance, it felt to me more just like a general attraction than like an actual relationship, but I did enjoy it. There's, you know, obviously some commentary here on just being transgender. There's like a bit of a transphobic scene that happens in a bathroom, but other characters are actually like super supportive. Some other characters tell this one like transphobic person to, you know, like basically go screw themselves, you know, and just be like, hey, this is really awesome, you know, like we are super accepting. So that was just really nice to see. Loki is still Loki. This is very much about like embracing and exploring this woman's body. And there's like a quote, something along the lines of like, a soul is a soul no matter the body. So I thought that was really nice. So yeah, overall, I would say like some entertaining moments here, but in general, like I don't know if it's something I would necessarily continue. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is Of Wicked Blood by Olivia Wildenstein and Katie Hayoz. This is also a book that I got from NetGalley. So this is like an urban fantasy paranormal romance type book where we follow Slate, who is a thief, and he steals a ring from a crypt, but it turns out to be cursed. We also have Cadence, who is one of these like 4 prominent families that must essentially like reunite these magical objects so Slate doesn't die because of this curse. So I really liked this general premise here of this curse and having to find these 4 parts of this artifact. You know, just like a magical treasure hunt is awesome. I loved that. You know, I thought the actual parts of the book that focused on these artifacts and just retrieving them were just absolutely fantastic, and by far the best parts of the story. You know, they're very fast paced, they're really interesting, they involve like different challenges to retrieve these artifacts. However, I think the parts in between these sections were full of so much angst and romance that I just didn't particularly enjoy as much. In terms of the characters, I don't think I really connected with anyone in particular. I felt like the main characters, Slate and Cadence, were both a little bit possessive and get jealous really easily. I didn't really care for the romance here, and I just, mostly because I didn't believe that they were as into each other as, you know, the book portrays it. So I feel like, for me, I just could have used more of like a slow burn. Like, I can totally buy attraction there, you know, they obviously have some chemistry and stuff, but I just felt like the feelings got a little bit too deep too quickly for me. There was some witty banter here, which I definitely enjoyed. I also really liked how protective Slate is of his brother. I think this was by far the best relationship in the book. And I did also enjoy seeing Slate kind of become this reluctant hero. I will also say I did enjoy the setting. It's like a small French university town, and it takes place around, you know, New Year's, so it's like really perfect to read in the winter. One thing that I'm going to specifically note is this actually explicitly mentions coronavirus, and I thought it was like a little bit dismissive of coronavirus, or like it kind of portrayed it as like, oh, this is, you know, this already happened and it's over now. So it was just a little bit weird, I guess, to read while the pandemic is still ongoing. So I just wanted to mention that in case that's something that would make you uncomfortable. But overall, you know, like this has a lot of really positive reviews on Goodreads that I've seen. And while I didn't like it as much as I hoped, I think this could still be worthwhile if you're interested in this premise. The next book I'll talk about is The Haunting of Beatrix Greene by Rachel Hawkins, Ash Parsons, and Vicky Alvear Shecter. So I got this from NetGalley, and this is kind of like a serial horror story. So we follow Beatrix, who is this spiritual medium, and she's offered a job by this scientist guy to do a seance at this haunted manor, and he has been like disproving mediums, so she's kind of unsure about taking this job. So the scientist, James, has some secrets, and it turns out some real spirits actually awaken, so they have to settle the ghost's unrest to get out of this manor alive. Generally, I enjoyed this. You know, I think it's a perfect read for the fall, especially around Halloween. I thought this serial nature of this story was really interesting. You know, it's kind of like each section kind of ends on almost like a next time on the show type vibe. I think each part was really easy to get through, and I really did enjoy reading it all together because you get the full story. Each author does a different section, and I really couldn't tell the difference between each of the sections in terms of the writing, so I think they did an excellent job blending this writing style, you know, together throughout the book. I loved this setting. You know, I find this time period with all this like spiritualism to be really interesting. And the setting of the house was super cool. You know, there's some very creepy elements here with the manor. And I just generally loved all these ghosts and just trying to figure out what's going on. The start of the book starts off with a bang, and I was just like immediately like, ooh, this is really cool. I want to know what happens. I liked Beatrix quite a bit. I thought she was very clever and good at what she does. I think the romance here was a bit too rushed for my taste, but I did like where it was ultimately headed. So yeah, I think if you're looking for a quick Halloween read, I would definitely recommend this. So now we get into the 4-star books, and the first book I'll talk about here is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. So this is an adult thriller where we follow Rowan, who takes a job as a live-in nanny at this smart home in the Scottish Highlands. However, a child under her care ends up dead, and she's in prison for murder. So she's essentially writing to this lawyer to explain what really happened. So I thought this was really easy to read, and I was super invested in the story very quickly. I thought it was generally well-paced. It did keep me guessing in parts. Like, I had a totally different theory of what was happening at the end. I liked this general structure of her writing from prison, and, you know, like, it kind of starts off with her, like, actually writing a letter, but then, like, the rest of it is just kind of like a normal narrative, but it's still just, you know, the idea of her trying to explain what happened was really interesting to me. I loved this creepy house setting. You know, I think smart houses and just in general, like, smart devices are a little too much for me at times. So I think, you know, a lot of what happened here was just super creepy to me. I think these kids that she's taking care of were not great, you know. I feel like creepy kids are also a good horror type mechanism, I guess. I liked, generally, like I mentioned, I liked the house. I liked the exploration in and around the house. There's some really interesting stuff that goes on there. And it felt to me like a gothic type setting. And I tend to enjoy gothic horror, so this worked really well for me. I liked the overall reveal, but I did kind of want it to tip over a bit more into like full-on horror, but you know, it's a thriller, so such is life. But this is my second favorite Ruth Ware book that I've read, so you know, it worked really well for me. So if this premise sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend it. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is Battleground by Jim Butcher. So I have agonized over how to rate this book, and I think 4-star is okay. I don't know. I really don't know how to feel about this. So this is the latest book in the Dresden Files, where, you know, it's book like 17 or something like that, so I'm going to keep this synopsis a little bit vague to not spoil anything, but essentially we have this fallout from peace talks, and war has come to Chicago. So we'll leave it at that. Peace talks and Battleground were split up from one book to two, for, you know, like, I don't know, publication reasons, I guess. Like, it would have been too expensive to publish them as one or something like that. But I think I would have preferred them actually to be one book. I just think it would have been a better story arc in general. You know, by themselves, I think they're some of the weaker entries in the Dresden Files for me. I really enjoyed Peace Talks because I think it was like, you know, we got to come back to the world of the Dresden Files after several years. But, like, looking back on it after having read Battleground, I'm kind of like, maybe I shouldn't have rated it so high? I don't know. I feel very conflicted about both of these books now, and I'm just, like, second-guessing myself. I still love the Dresden Files, and it's definitely one of my favorite series, but I don't know. I just don't know how to feel. Battleground has a lot of nonstop action, and it really never lets up, so I think at times it felt a little bit tiring just to read this like constant action, like everything's going on right now. There were some interesting reveals that happened. Some of them I think seemed reasonable to me, but some kind of came out of nowhere. There's also some sad moments too, some that are, and some just generally like divisive moments here. And I know like Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative is, I think, much more upset about something that happened than I am. I'm not surprised that some things happened, but the manner of them seems to be kind of this like hit or miss thing for fans. I am okay with it just because I think he's setting us up for things that are going to happen in the future. In the future, I'm going to treat Peace Talks and Battleground as one book and like read them back to back, because I think, you know, even though there was only a couple months between Peace Talks and Battleground, I did struggle some to remember some of the dangling threads from Peace Talks. One quick note, there was a Kraken appearance, so I loved that. I think the fallout here is definitely going to be interesting, and I'm obviously going to continue the series, but yeah, I don't know. I know I'm saying I don't know a lot, but I'm so conflicted about this book. I don't know. I still love the series as a whole, though. So I have one 4.5-star book, and that's A Killing Frost by Seanan McGuire. So this is some number of book in the October Day series. I think this is book 14. This is an urban fantasy series that deals a lot with the Fae. Here, October must invite another character to her wedding to avoid political turmoil, and she has to go on a quest. So we'll leave that synopsis really vague. I think this was still generally enjoyable, and I think does advance the overall plot in a way that I like. I do think it was a little bit slow to start for me, and, you know, I think it's just like no rest for Toby. I think there were some, like, jokes here about Toby maybe trying to avoid this wedding, and, you know, to me, this kind of read as Seanan McGuire almost, like, making fun of herself for postponing this wedding, like, continually throughout the books with, like, more quests and things for October, or for Toby to do. So I just thought that was entertaining. There was one main character that has generally been involved in a lot of these books that wasn't really here as much as I would have liked. This mostly focuses on Toby, May, and Quentin. Toby is the type of character who kind of like leaps into doing things without really talking to others, but she's starting to realize, you know, that can actually hurt those that she cares about, which I thought was, you know, like a nice realization for her to have. I still generally like her. One of her abilities is to like smell the different types of magic, and that's always just been really interesting to me, just to like, you know, see what different characters' magic smells like, and just like the different combinations of things. We do have a lot of blood magic here again, which is also interesting. I liked the direction that a resolution with one character kind of goes. I'm trying to again be big, and I like how, you know, the big three, like Oberon, Maeve, and Titania, they play a bit more of a role here. I always like this sea witch type character. She isn't as present here, but so I did kind of like miss out on her, but, you know, she's always enjoyable. There's also a novella here that's about Patrick meeting Diana, and so they're kind of like one of the like sea fae type people. So I thought this was like an interesting background story to things that are mentioned in the book, and I did just enjoy generally exploring more of this undersea kingdom. So, you know, overall, like I continue to like this series, and it's one that I'm going to keep reading, and you know, I feel like things have finally happened that I've been like waiting for this entire time. So I feel like, you know, we're starting to get into more of like the end game type plots. I don't know how many books are supposed to be in this series, but I'm very interested to see what happens next. And finally, the last book I'll talk about is a 5-star book, and that's Solutions and Other Problems by Allie Brosh. These are comics about silly things like animals, ridiculous situations, but we also have more serious topics like her health, her divorce, just loneliness in general. Her sister died between, you know, her first book, Hyperbole and a Half, and this book coming out. I think it's fantastic. I really love this art style. It's just like absolutely hilarious to me. Her comedic timing is just really excellent, and I just very much connect with this. You know, there's like one particular thing in here where I was hysterically laughing, and it was like one of those things where I get into a loop of just like, I start laughing, and then like, I'm laughing at myself for laughing so hard, and then it's like, I start crying because I'm laughing so much. It's a lot, but that definitely happened here. Like, I showed it to Ivy, and he did not think it was nearly as hilarious as I did, but you know. Things like that happen. I really liked her candid discussion on these more serious topics. It's a lot of like really heavy stuff to deal with, and I just liked seeing her be able to discuss it. So yeah, if I could give this like 1,000,000 stars, I would. I just absolutely love this, and I would highly recommend it. So with that, those are the 10 books that I have to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments if you read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, let's just go with like, has there been a book that you've read recently that you thought you would love and you just didn't? Just thinking about Raging Dragons here. If you want to join my Discord, the link is in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.